Welcome, future viewers. This conversation is between Artspace visual culture producer, myself, Gabriel Sacco, and the Unlearning Collective, recipients of our inaugural Short Shift Residency, a micro-residency program initiated by the current team at Artspace to provide a platform for collectives to create a pop-up exhibition, inciting civic discourse and patron engagement over the ideas that support collectives today. This residency period took place over 2 weeks from November 28th to December 11th, 2022. The pop-up exhibition, titled Still Processing, takes place on December 9th through the 11th, 2022 at Artspace New Haven. This conversation was pre-recorded on December 7th, 2022 and on view during the pop-up exhibition dates as a supplement to provide context for the 2022 Short Shift Residency. Hello, Unlearning Collective. I'm joined here on Zoom with Renée Bouchard, Matthew Gernt, and Julie Graves Krishnaswami. Welcome. I'd like to congratulate you all on the micro-residency and the pop-up exhibition at Artspace New Haven. We've been having so many generous conversations over the past 2 weeks, and I just want to first start by introducing the Unlearning Collective. I'll read your bio. The Unlearning Collective seeks to challenge imperial thought and influences embedded in everyday experiences. In their work, they interrupt the normalization of violence in language, historical narratives, and social, economic, and political othering. They investigate what it means to unlearn as a process of recognizing through shared reading and conversation and our individual art practices. In the book, Potential History, Unlearning Imperialism, scholar Ariella Azoulay posits that the camera shutter creates imperial violence by drawing 3 dividing lines in time, in space, and in the body politic between those who process and operate such devices and appropriate and accumulate their product and those whose countenance, resources, or labor are extracted. Current support for the Unlearning Collective generously comes from the Puffin Foundation. So welcome again. And I'm just thinking of how we can really enter into this conversation about the work and about collectives. It strikes me that a lot of the work that the 3 of you are doing together is about collectivity itself and modeling collectivity, determining its value, working through ideas together. So thinking maybe we can start by determining how one might initiate a collective through your experience of starting one. So maybe, Matthew, maybe you could just dive into how you started the collective.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all met in grad school, and I think, our collective formed quite naturally. I think individually, we all have a really rich and research practice that fuels our individual artistic practices. And we started to have conversations based off of some of these ideas that we've been interested individually as a way to understand some of these concepts that we've been interested in individually over the last year or so. And so we started reading this book by Ariella Azoulay, Potential History. And after that, we just decided to really think about how we can take some of these ideas and do something and take this conversation that we've been having and try to do something else with it related to our artistic practices.
Yeah, thanks. So that sort of like leads into my next question, which is a two maybe a double question in one. I'm just wondering, like, why are you making these things together? Why are you making art together and collectivizing? Specifically, how do you see the work fitting together, and what's the use of collectives? So yeah, Renée, maybe you can start us off by talking about why we're doing this together.
Okay. Well, as artists, we are in flux right now. I think there's a lot of people who are in flux, and taking the idea of Western art and Western art history, and realizing that it's somewhat flipped upside down right now. And we have to be part of this process of unlearning it. There's specifically in museum settings, when work has been looted from other countries and taken out of context of where it was made and who made it, we have a lot of repairing to do. And so Azoulay writes this very, very, very eloquently. On page 152, she says, this process requires a pause, a cessation of the relentless movement that fuels the world of art and its insatiable quest to discover what is not yet known, discovered, named, shown, or created in the form of the new, the extravagant, and the spectacular. So for me, that's like a very capitalistic approach to exhibiting and making artwork. Something that's new, what's next. And for me as a painter, I have to really think about this obsession of the individual. And partly I'm in this collective because I want to unlearn that in my own practice. So Julie has talked a lot about the squashing of competition in our group. And that's something that I believe very strongly in. Because I see art making as a practice that is relational and absolutely in conversation with visual culture, and specifically our collective has a really my practice has become much more in focus due to our shared research in this. Julie, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our individual art practices are the tools or the vehicles through which we explore these ideas. And the act of knowledge sharing is really central to how we operate. There's like the art world, like here in New Haven or internationally, is just all about the individual, and that brings just an extreme amount of competition. And we thought, like, let's get together, talk about these ideas, and whatever we create, maybe we create maybe we curate a show, maybe we participate in a residency, maybe we do a mail art project, maybe we make one work together, whatever that making is, doing it collectively and sharing the ideas cuts down on that competition and that focus on the individual.
Yeah, and if I could just add something to what Julie and Renee were saying. Yeah, I think also the idea of coming together and creating a community and creating a small group has a lot of power in that. And so for us to work individually and to do things on our own, we come across all these obstacles. But when we're working together and we can bounce ideas back and forth, and we can each reach out with our own individual networks and combine all that together, it gives us a bit more energy and a bit more resources and a bit more power for us to make the kind of work we want to make and show it to the audience that we want to show it to.
So one of the things we've been talking about throughout this residency period, and also producing the pop-up exhibition, is the idea that, you know, we can have a show, a group show, or we can have a show by a collective. And I'm wondering if we could talk through the difference between those two things and how we've been talking about them through the residency period. And yeah, I think the form in which the conversation happens, this visual language that you're putting on a wall, having your ideas meet together. In a group show, the theme may be presented by a curator who's outside of the collective. And in a show by a collective, what we're proposing and doing this round during the short shift is, and the ideas are presented by the collective, and I'm joining, and Laurel and Lisa are joining for the facilitation of these ideas that are really being presented by you all. And just to know that this is a possibility for collectives as artists to do, and not just curators, sort of taking on that additional work, crediting the contributors yourselves and not taking the ideas out of the context. I think that's where part of the power in collectivizing and you being a collective lies in many ways. And I'm curious if you want to respond to this at all. You know, the difference between a group show and a collective show, or a show by a collective.
Sure. Well, I can go from here. First of all, VCFA, where we all graduated from and had very generous support from our professor, Louis Jacob, support us in this reading, also is a very supportive program for collectives. So this idea, I think, is something that the school wants for us to have. And the idea of a collective is really, I think it's about solidarity and having both a sense of selflessness and then also a sense of advocating for each other. And what's interesting is the other half of producing work is to then exhibit it. So Matthew pointed out that unlike a group show, this opportunity at Artspace has it's in a way enlarged the collective to include Artspace, and you as curators who are editing and even more so double checking facts and citations and labels and all of these things that are important for the audience to understand fully what we're doing.
I can just respond. You know, there's having like a shared sense of ideas over time. It kind of brings it means that we are sort of as the artists kind of taking back some of that power from the institution, and it's a very small act of rebellion, I think, on our part, to say like, no, we're going to be in charge of these ideas, and then we're going to be in charge of presenting our work in a way that has the dialogue with the audience and with the institution, with us in the driver's seat, not the institution in the driver's seat. And I think our model, and certainly the model that Artspace has, or certainly the forum that Artspace has provided for us, is actually one where you, Gabe, as the curator, and Laurel also as a curator, and Lisa as a representative of the institution, you've come into the network of our collective. And so we're all working on this presentation together. And you know, maybe that means that some of the ideas change, but again, it's sort of less focus on the individual and less focus on the presentation of the work by the institution, and centering the ideas from from our collective sort of shared view.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to what Julie said, because I think, again, like I think one of the things the three of us are trying to do within the art world is to really dismantle this idea of the artist applies for a grant and waits for this answer and really at the mercy of whoever is in charge of the show or their future, what have you. And here we really want to work with institutions together on an even plane and really try to work out a show that everyone's contributing together, and it's not this coming from the top down type of scenario that we see so often in the art world.
And with imperialism in general, when there are such strong divisions created, and we want to widen the interaction as much as possible.
Right. Yes. I'm so happy we're getting these ideas down. I think, Renée, that you just brought in imperialism. And I think, we're talking about what a collective is and means to us and you all as a collective, but that's not what you talk about all of the time, right? There's something in presenting that you are presenting here that is more meaty and sort of inside the shell of the collective. So I want to say the word unlearning is hot right now and that it holds so much meaning in so many contexts. But we're specifically talking about unlearning imperialism. Renée, I think you have some ideas that you want to get into here too. Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I think it's great that it's a hot topic, because for me, it has to do with the ing and the processing, how important that is to me and our collective, and to you too, Artspace. It is a process. So as soon as we put something into a box or a category, which typically happens in art history, Western art history, in museums, in science even, and there's one idea, it's very difficult sometimes to accept. It's harder for acceptance to be involved when there's a lot of division. Specifically, we thought about naming ourselves Unlearning Imperialism in our daily lives for a while, because we each have very distinctly different daily lives. And these kinds of things that happen in my daily life, for instance, in terms of unlearning, are like, it can be seen as generational in many ways. Things that I talk about with my father help me and him we both unlearn simultaneously. But also at the same time, the hot topic thing is interesting to me, because I feel like trends come and go, but I hope this one stays.
I want to bring people who are watching this into our conversation in ways accessible to publics and approaches that I see and you all see unlearning existing in the things that you've said so far, such as knowledge sharing, learning as a shared collective practice, knowledge production in a non-progressive way, shared research that creates dialogue. Keeping within these bounds or otherwise, how do you activate unlearning practices in your work?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Well, I think something that we've been discussing over the last several months, year or so, is what does unlearning look like, and what are those processes involved? And as we've been kind of discussing, it does involve these prefixes of D and re and un, whether it's rewinding or unraveling or deconstructing, and really trying to understand these certain moments where we can recognize imperial ideology or these acts in our daily lives, like Renee was talking about, and how can we really unpack that and discuss that together. So for me, when I think about unlearning, it involves community and group knowledge sharing. And then I think also one of the things that we've been interested individually as artists is how do we make artwork that isn't trying to be cutting edge, but is in a non-progressive format, and thinking about how we can create tools or strategies that we can then discuss and share with others.
Yeah, for me, I think like I ask many of the questions that Matt just raised about the material that I work with. I work with text, language, and specifically the text of laws and court decisions and other official speech. And I like to ask those questions of the text. And then for me, this is kind of like an act of interruption. And this act of interruption can reveal, quite a lot. Sometimes it can reveal, violence in the language, but sometimes it can reveal who is actually doing the speaking, like the subject of the text. And so that's the way that that our shared knowledge enters my practice.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, especially when we talk about law and legislation, it functions much in the way an institution functions, where it neutralizes and naturalizes violence. And one of like what's so amazing about your work is this sort of like re-examination of the laws and really working through that to expose that violence. So that's something that, again, like when we're meeting collectively and meeting as a group, just sort of hearing Julie or Renee talk about the ways in which they're bringing that our conversation into their work, and then making work and then showing that work to me, then fuels my own, creative process and my own ideas. I think that's another way in which we unlearn together, is having our own separate practices and then bringing it to the table and having an open discussion about that.
I can comment on my own individual practice as a painter. And for me, the question that I always get from people is, how do you know when it's done? So that question is where I unlearn. And I don't ever really want my painting to be done. So for me, I attempt to have this edge between finished and unfinished, because I just love the work still being in process.
Yeah, we were talking earlier before we started this meeting today. Julie and I were having this discussion about like, studio spaces and renting a studio space. And I'm thinking about leaving my studio space. And sometimes, you get into this rhythm of just like not really having quote unquote like a studio practice where you go to a place and make work. But and then sometimes, there are a lot of struggles, and as a artist, and as a creator who likes to use my hands and paint and draw, there's something that's sort of like, oh no, I have to kind of keep that studio practice going. But I do see the conversations that we have as a form of my studio practice now. And I think that, being in this sort of dialogue in a way is becoming an art practice for me, and it's helping me develop my ideas, and it's helping me develop my projects, so that when I do have I work in photography, film, and painting. And so then I have a better idea about, okay, this is the right media for me to work with this project, and this is how I can go about doing it, because I'm having this ongoing discussion, this long, discussion for many months. It really becomes, integral to my studio practice. Absolutely.
Yeah, and as you say that, Matt, like to follow up on what some of the questions that Gabe has posed to us, I mean, I think our collective exists in our conversations, and there are many ways to be a collective, and I think this residency has been so powerful because in it, Gabe and Laurel and Lisa have entered into our collective in a really powerful way that's moved our conversation and our conversation and our art practices forward.
Yeah, I guess like what I'm hearing and just want to reiterate, like daily unlearning is just so inherently in our language and in these prefixes, the continuing verbs with ing at the end. I just want to zoom back out too and try to relate this work to future collectives and modeling these, the things that you're doing for publics and for other collectives, for yourself. It's again really exciting to me that you all are not making one collective work for this residency specifically and the pop-up exhibition specifically. It's an installation that, as we've talked about, is in conversation with each other, that can be seen together. I'm just realizing this marriage of individualism and collectivism and where that line meets. It's so inspiring to see individuals who are able to come together with ideas while still keeping a sense of individualism in your own work and finding the nodes that you're able to convene upon, especially under Western imperialism that peddles individualism and seclusion. I'm curious to hear from you all what you see the future of collectivity generally and for the Unlearning Collective as well.
Well, again, I'll say, in the world you just described, Gabe, of seclusion and capitalism, nobody wants this kind of work that we're doing. It's counterculture. And we're going to keep doing it. And I'm excited to see what the next step is. If it's actually getting a residency together again and making work collaboratively. We've thrown ideas out about that. I think there's a potential for that. But mainly, I'm just really excited to see the threads that are going to happen once we actually see the work in person and together for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I've been like so grateful for about being in this residency over the last week or so is the sort of like tangents that we've been able to go on about the future of our collective and thinking about like what can we do and having that discussion, because there's so much time that we don't allow ourselves to have to really think about the kind of what can we do in the future for future projects. And we're really thinking about like what project are we doing right now, and to be able to have that space to be to have that space to be able to discuss about, okay, well, maybe we can do a project that doesn't involve a gallery, or doesn't involve a art space, or maybe it can exist in a space where you know, it's a storefront that is, you know, going, you know, maybe there's a changing of storefront, a store, oh gosh, and sometimes I think in French and I want to say propriétaire, owners of a store, that's the right way to say it, and just inhabit that space and occupy that space while there's that sort of transitional period and have a sort of pop-up show in that sense. And you know, thinking about all the sort of different options that are open to us. And I think one thing as a collective that we'd like to stress is that you can get people together, you can bring your communities together, and we all have different communities, and bring them together and make something of that. And so I think when we think of our, when we've been thinking about our future and future projects, yeah, I think we're headed into that sort of direction of, you know, which way can we subvert institutions? Which way can we, you know, bypass the having to apply for a residency or a grant, and trying to be creative in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and no one is self-made on their own. And so I hope that through this conversation, we can encourage other folks to come together with their, you know, with their colleagues, their friends, their classmates, near and far, and engage in conversations about their art making as a relational exercise, like a regular conversation. And you know, for me, it's really pushed my art practice along. And frankly, I don't know if I would be making work without without working in the context of this collective.
Well, thank you all so much. It sounds like, you know, what just continuing to poke holes in this myth of individualism is an act of rebellion, and collectivizing is an act of rebellion in itself. And when we're all being asked to step down in a way, or silently even. So I just want to, yeah, again, thank you so much, and really looking forward to realizing this exhibition with you all, and presenting this to our patrons and interlocutors.
And I just want to thank you, specifically Gabe and Laurel and Lisa and Artspace, for supporting us in this work and really like bolstering our work and the work of our collective, and giving us like all the support that you've given us over the last few weeks, and a platform to talk about this with, you know, with the New Haven community and with the community, you know, writ large.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's been really wonderful for us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed. Much thanks and gratitude for Artspace.
Well, yeah, we just find it, yeah, so generous and so thankful to have this be the inaugural iteration of the short shift. So with that, we can sign off, and looking forward to seeing you all this weekend and making this come to life.